We weren't supposed to know where we were from. We were supposed to leave and never come back. So this is an act of resistance.
If you are here because you've traced your ancestry with AfricanAncestry.com, let's make some noise, please.
It is happening, interestingly, right before our very eyes. Black adults from across the globe are all jumping on the Ancestry wagon. The Black Diaspora has begun tracing their ancestral route.
We just came back. We remembered where we were from.
Still don't know what I am talking about? Then kindly allow me indulge you with the following view for a brief moment.
Willie would turn out to be the linchpin of this story. He was born in May of 1905, and we found him in the 1910 census for Georgia, listed as a son of a couple named Nathan and Emily Head. But we soon began to wonder if this census was correct. When we compared Sierra's DNA profile to millions of other profiles in publicly available databases, we discovered that she has multiple matches to people who are related to her through Willie Head and through Willie's mother, Emily. But when we tried to connect her to Nathan Head, we noticed something unusual. Turn the page.
Wow, it says
How many matches do you see?
zero.
Zero. Now, I'm going to explain
What you about to tell me right now?
what it means.
Okay, let's go.
Nathan Head is not your biological ancestor. That means that Nathan is not Willie's father. Willie, unbeknownst probably to Willie, had a different father.
Oh, wow.
Have you ever heard any family stories about that?
No.
We now had a question in front of us. If Nathan Head wasn't Willie's biological father, then who was? There were no further records to guide us. Our only hope was DNA. Our genetic genealogist, C.C. Moore, noticed that while Sierra did not have any matches to Nathan Head, she did match a number of individuals who could only be related to her through the man who had actually fathered Willie. And all of these people had one thing in common. They were white, leading to an inescapable conclusion. Your biological great-great-grandfather was white.
That's crazy. I think about like my grandfather's hair.
Oh, yeah?
You know.
He had good hair?
Pretty. As he got older, he got a little more, a little more coarse. But I look at some of his, the photos that I did get to see from when he was younger with my grandma, and it was fine.
Yep.
Hair.
Now you know why.
Yeah, that's amazing.
It was one thing to know that Willie's father was white, another to actually find his name. But turning back to the DNA databases, Cece was able to do just that. By building family trees for each of the matches that she'd found, and connecting one of them to Sierra's ancestors.
Now, that was Kiara, on her way to connecting back with her ancestral roots through recent advances in genetic technology, and she succeeded in achieving just that.
So you want to meet your great-great-grandfather?
Yes.
And this is a fact, but beyond a doubt. Turn the page.
I'm ready.
Would you please read the name in the box directly above the name of your great-grandfather, Willie?
Walker Lafayette Head.
You just met your great-great-grandfather.
And if Kiara's story still leaves you in some sort of doubt, then the story of Al Roker journeying all the way down to Senegal to connect with his ancestral roots might attempt to mean something.
Well, tracing your lineage is all the rage right now. It's something I've been working on for 2 decades. When I started, it was all about sifting through old documents physically. But now, thanks to advances in science, an Ancestry DNA test allowed historians help me zero in on where I'm from. Their findings led me to Senegal, the westernmost point in mainland Africa. It's the land of my forefathers and mothers, once taken from their homes in West Africa. I returned to see the world they left behind.
Al Roker's journey to Senegal to trace his ancestral roots involved a series of cultural and emotional experiences that connected him with his African heritage. Through DNA testing, he had learned that his family's lineage originated in Senegal, prompting him to visit the country and explore its history and culture.
Dakar, Senegal, a vibrant city with bustling markets, a celebrated art and music scene, and a laid-back coastal vibe. Some 6,000 miles away, and yet I feel I've come home.
Al's visit to Senegal, the westernmost point of mainland Africa, had allowed him to experience the world his ancestors had left behind. He had traveled to Dakar and other areas, engaging with the local community and learning about the hardships faced by his ancestors.
My first stop is what may have been the last place my ancestors saw before leaving this country. Gorée Island and its House of Slaves, a symbol of the African slave trade.
Al Roker began his tour of Senegal at Dakar's Gorée Island and its House of Slaves, a museum and memorial to the Atlantic slave trade. My people were captured, kidnapped, bound and packed like cargo on ships heading across the ocean. Others jumped from this door of no return, pulled under the water by the weight of their chains. The museum features the haunting Door of No Return, where captive men, women, and children in chains had their last glimpse of Africa before they were packed on cargo ships and transported to America. Some of them jumped to their death, pulled under the water by the weight of their chains.
They literally put up gangplank.
Exactly, it's the door of the voyage without return. So that's the last contact, really, with Africa.
A trip to Gorée was a sobering, haunting glimpse into the past for Roker. He had found this depressing feeling hard to put up with.
I feel this very odd mix of rage, of depression, joy in a way, of knowing that even with all of this, my family and African Americans as a people were able to rise above this. I think it's a weird brew of emotions. You know, it's going to take a while to kind of sort them out.
He also received a glimpse into the country's vibrant present and future.
But I'm also here to learn about Senegal's present and future. So it's only fitting that my host, his first grade teacher, Mr. Youssafa Sow,
to be like full-blown Senegalese,
who's prepared a few lessons for me. Wow. Oh my gosh, this is unbelievable.
This trip, to meet with his roots, had in fact allowed Roker to gain a deeper understanding of his family's legacy and the connection between his heritage and the African nation.
Maybe coming into it, you're a little skeptical, perhaps, and then you're here and you see the tradition and you see there's this connection between you and people for hundreds of years, and you're all in.
This exciting, phenomenal breakthrough has got many African Americans trying it out today. The uptick reflected in the numbers. African Ancestry noted a 35% boost in test takers between 2019 and 2021. Even celebrities that you know aren't left out in the leap of faith. And they were all, of a truth, amazed at how now, within grasp, tracing their ancestral roots has indeed become.
Oh my God. Tingling right now.
Frank Owens, age 40, sex male. Lovey Owens, age 30, female.
Now, you just met your third great-grandparents, your great-great-great-grandparents. And Latifah, in 1860, they are listed by name in the census. So what does that mean?
That means they weren't slaves?
That means you descend from free Negroes. You descend from free people of color.
Thank you, Lord.
Now here is another celebrity you may know.
I'm buzzing. Like my arms, my body is buzzing, like, whoa.
We took musician Pharrell Williams on an extraordinary journey, all thanks to one single document. The story begins with his great-great-grandfather, a man named Fenner Williams. Fenner died in 1927, but his sister, Jane Arrington, lived into the late 1930s. And near the end of Jane's life, she was interviewed about her experiences under slavery, allowing Pharrell the opportunity to read the actual words of one of his own relatives who had endured bondage. something very few African Americans are ever able to do.
I was born on the 18th of December, 1852. I was born on the plantation near Tar River. My mother was named Louisa May, and my father was named Louis May. My mother had 6 children, 4 boys and 2 girls. The boys were Richard, Pharaoh, Caesar, and Fenner. The girls, Rose and Jane. Jane, that's me. Wow.
That is your great-great-grandfather's sister, and she is your great-great-great-aunt.
Crazy.
Jane Arrington, Pharrell Williams' great-great-great-aunt, was interviewed as part of what's known as the Slave Narrative Project, a collective oral history comprised of roughly 2,300 interviews with formerly enslaved people. The project was sponsored by the federal government in the 1930s. Jane's words had given Pharrell an intimate glimpse of his ancestors' experience under slavery, but those words also forced him to confront the cruel reality of what those ancestors actually experienced, and the realizations concerning his great-great-grandfather, Fenner, which struck Pharrell remarkably hard.
So we estimate that Fenner was born between 1855 and 1857. Okay, we're pretty sure about that. So you know what that means. That means that he was most likely born into slavery and not freed until the end of the Civil War.
Wow, at 10 years old.
The first 10 years of his life would have been spent in slavery.
Wow.
You know, we tend to think of as adults, but think about a little boy.
I don't want to cry, and I'm trying not to be angry.
You're not a machine. This is horrendous. What else can you feel? It's horrible.
It's intense, sir. It's intense.
Pharrell's ancestors likely suffered more than he can even imagine. In the interview, Jane recalled minute details about their daily lives on a cotton plantation, revealing the degradation endured every day. The suffering may obviously have been unimaginable.
We lived in log houses with stick and dirt, chimneys. They called them the slave houses. I worked on the farm, cutting corn stalks and tending to cattle in slavery time. Sometimes I swept the yards. After working all day, there was a task of cotton to be picked and spun by them. What kind of people? What kind of people? It puts a very vivid, intense context behind what it means to be African American. And I thank God that I got to hear it.
African history, we all know, is one of the oldest and richest in the world, yet much of it has been hidden, distorted, erased, especially for those whose ancestors were taken away through slavery or colonization. Many African Americans over the years had already given up on ever being able to learn anything about their ancestors who were enslaved, and for a long time, sadly, this was true. But because of recent exciting advances in technology and digitization, this is no longer the case. African Americans and their connection to Africa ought to be nothing other than simple, as well as a little complex, to fix. It is no news that most blacks in the Americas happens to be descendants of Africans who were forcibly brought to the Americas as slaves during the transatlantic slave trade. As a result, many African Americans have a deep desire to understand their roots and reconnect with their ancestral homeland. During the 19th century, there was a growing interest among African Americans in their African heritage. In earlier times, many prominent African Americans, such as Frederick Douglass and Martin Delany, had advocated for the return of African Americans to Africa, either through colonization or voluntary repatriation.
This is the opportunity now to be able to own that in which we're complaining about. Because in Africa, it's a clean slate. You can build that empire there. You can build that infrastructure there. It just, and you already got the information. You're already educated on how to do it, because we've done it here and made billions of dollars for corporations all day. And then all the value that we bring here we took over there, America wouldn't exist no more.
Bob Liv and Zumanda.
None of that would work. Think about it. Just imagine, man. All the major ball players left, started their own team back home. All the major recording artists left, started their own labels back home. Just imagine, just those two sectors. We're not talking about all the inventors that never got the credit for all the shit that they inventing, like cell phones and all that black people invented.
Black excellence.
You would never even know. All these software companies that's taking, you know, you have no idea, like, we don't even know how much value we even have. We have no idea. Just imagine if we just woke up one day.
This movement was known as the Back to Africa movement. In the early 20th century, the Harlem Renaissance brought African American culture and art to the forefront of American society.
Go back to Africa.
Okay.
Whatever you're doing here, do it there. Whether it's real estate, entertainment, education,
label, sneaker company,
whatever,
clothing line,
whatever.
Start it there.
Do it there. Don't even start it. Do it there. It's gonna grow out of there anyway. But Africa's big enough you won't ever have to need no other country anyway.
And just like the hip-hop legend Akon, many other African American writers, artists, and musicians are on a campaign to get African Americans to move back to Africa, which is their original home. The Back to Africa movement, known also as the colonization movement or Black Zionism, began in the United States in the 19th century. Black emigration to Africa grew in the wake of Northern slave emancipation from 1780 to 1846. During this movement, free Black Boston shipowner Paul Cuffey transported 38 ex-slaves to Sierra Leone in 1815, which foreshadowed a meeting of Presbyterian ministers in Philadelphia the next year. They organized the American Colonization Society, ACS, whose wealthy members included Southern masters who pushed to relocate freed blacks. Black opposition to and support for ACS increased. ACS received a whooping $100,000 federal subsidy and founded the African colony of Liberia in 1821. It resettled probably 13,000 blacks prior to the Civil War and a total of 20,000 by its closing in 1910. Blacks also emigrated by means of independent black programs despite slavery and post-Civil War segregation. Vital to emigrationism circa from 1900s to 1945 were Pan-African Congresses and the Universal Negro Improvement Association, founded by Garvey, pursuing back to Africa, freedom, independence, and justice for blacks in Africa and its diaspora. Many civil rights and black power activists had later began pursuing the same goals. During the civil rights movement of the 1950s and 1960s, African Americans had also sought to reclaim their African heritage as a source of strength and pride. The Black Power movement emphasized the importance of African heritage in the struggle for civil rights and advocated for a return to African cultural values and traditions. In recent years, advances in technology have made it easier for African Americans to trace their roots back to Africa. DNA testing and genealogy research have allowed many African Americans to discover their ancestral origins and connect with their African heritage. This involves collecting and analyzing historical records such as birth and death certificates, marriage licenses, census records, and immigration documents. Genealogy research can be time-consuming and requires a significant amount of effort and attention to detail, but it can be a very effective way to trace one's ancestry. In addition to DNA testing and genealogy research, there are also several resources and tools available to help people trace their African roots. One example is the African Ancestry database, which provides a comprehensive database of African genetic sequences and can help to identify specific ethnic groups and regions of origin. Take for another good instance, Evan Cheney.
I can only go so far back in my family as far as my great-grandparents, and on one side. On the other side was just my grandparents, and that was not enough for me.
But unlike his grandparents, Mr. Cheney could use DNA to pick up where the paper trail had ended, a test, through AfricanAncestry.com that can trace his roots back hundreds of years, not only to a special country but to a specific tribe.
And I learned that on my mother's maternal side, I am the Tikar, Hausa, and Fulani out of Cameroon, and the Bubi people out of Bioko Island, which is a part of Equatorial Guinea.
What was your reaction when you saw that?
You feel a sense of home, a sense of belonging.
Cultural heritage tours and genealogy conferences are also available for those interested in tracing their African ancestry. These tours and conferences often offer access to local resources and experts, as well as opportunities to connect with other people who are tracing their roots back to Africa.
What's your sense as to why we're seeing more people interested in connecting with their roots and learning more about their origin?
That's like the missing link in our heritage, and it directly impacts our identity.
Professor Kefensi Chaik says the desire has always been there, but he does believe upward trends are tied to current events, which has to do with a boost in popularity, thought to be a response to the perceived systemic oppression of Black Americans today that began when their ancestors were first brought into the country.
We weren't supposed to know where we were from. We were supposed to leave and never come back.
The quest to reconnect with Africa's rich cultural heritage is a powerful and enduring one for many African Americans. Driven by a deep-seated desire to reclaim their roots, explore their ancestral homeland, and rediscover their identity, individuals embark on a journey of self-discovery, cultural revitalization, and historical exploration. This journey is often motivated by a complex array of factors like 1. Understanding personal identity. Many African Americans feel a sense of disconnection from their ancestral heritage due to the trauma of the transatlantic slave trade and the erasure of their cultural traditions. Tracing their roots back to Africa goes a long way in helping them understand their personal identity and reconnect with their ancestral heritage. The African identity is being with, as opposed to the Western individualism, communalism, as opposed to collectivism. African self is rooted in familyhood. The West had initially battered African worldview and cultural heritage with the racialism, slave trade, colonization, and other Western ideologies. They considered Africans inferiors and influenced most Africans to see themselves as such. Thus, Africans are backward and without integral development and independence, although it was quite certain that pre-colonial Africa was not static or dead. However, the essence of philosophy is to inquire critically into the marvels and problems that confront one in his world in view of producing systematic explanation and sustained response to them. Therefore, different Africans all across the globe focuses on these marvels and problems confronting the Africa world. The essence of the philosophical paradigm of African identity and development is to reason out the way people think with the aim of rediscovering and situating them on the right track, which is being original and authentic with the view of arriving at a desired goal. For many in the Black diaspora, tracing ancestry is more than just discovering roots. It's about reclaiming identity. Historically, African people have faced stereotypes, slavery, colonization, and neo-colonization, which have distorted their image and impacted their development. By reconnecting with their African heritage, individuals can break free from these external influences and define their own narratives. This journey is about empowerment, self-discovery, and embracing cultural roots. It's a people-centered approach that prioritizes the needs and aspirations of African people and communities. Through tracing ancestry, individuals can gain a deeper understanding of their history, culture, and identity. This knowledge can foster a sense of belonging, pride, and connection to their African heritage, ultimately contributing to a more authentic and empowered sense of self. 2. Reconnecting with ancestral homeland. Africans are embarking on the journey to trace their original ancestry because they yearn to reconnect with their ancestral homeland. This journey can be a powerful way to reclaim cultural heritage, foster a sense of belonging, and promote healing and empowerment. For many individuals, discovering the real customs, music, and art of their ancestors' homeland can be a deeply emotional and enriching experience. It can evoke feelings of pride, nostalgia, and belonging, and help them develop a stronger sense of cultural identity. By learning about their ancestral homeland, most individuals have also gained a deeper understanding of the historical context that shaped their ancestors' experiences, and the knowledge of this has made most individuals therapeutic, allowing them to process historical trauma and find closure. Ultimately, for most Africans in diaspora, reconnecting with their ancestral heritage had been a transformative experience that empowered most of them to take control of their own identity and cultural narrative. This idea has fostered a sense of connection to their roots and promotes self-discovery, healing, and growth. 3. Healing historical trauma. Ancestral healing is a deeply rooted and culturally significant practice that involves acknowledging, honoring, and seeking to heal the experiences, traumas, and wisdom of one's ancestors. It is a process of connecting with the lineage that came before us, recognizing the impact of their lives on our own, and working towards healing generational wounds and imbalances. This practice is particularly important for individuals who are part of the African diaspora, as it addresses the historical and intergenerational traumas stemming from events such as the transatlantic slave trade, colonization, and the displacement of people from their ancestral homelands. Ancestral healing provides a means to confront and heal these deep-seated wounds, while also celebrating the strength and resilience that have been passed down through generations. Ancestral healing offers the greatest recovery of one's sense of belonging and home. Knowing that you come from somewhere and tracing down to the very roots of one's lineage is an unbelievable feeling of fulfillment. This serves as a bridge between generations and offers a broad pathway towards personal discovery and development. 4. Understanding more about African history. As Africans in the diaspora trace their roots back to the continent, they are uncovering stories that were long buried under the weight of slavery, colonization, and historical distortion. This journey is more than a personal search. It is a collective awakening to the richness of Africa's original history and the truth about their ancestral identity. For many, it begins with the realization that Africa was never a land of silence or darkness, as colonial narratives once portrayed. It was a continent of powerful kingdoms, scholarly cities, and vibrant cultures. Diasporans are learning that long before European colonizers set foot on the continent, Africa had empires with structured governance, trade systems, and centers of learning. Names like Timbuktu and Great Zimbabwe are no longer just echoes in history books. They now represent advanced civilizations where education, innovation, and commerce thrived. As they dig deeper, they also confront the painful truths of slavery, and not just the brutality of the trade, but also the strength of those who resisted. They begin to understand that the story of their ancestors is not just one of victimhood, but also of survival, resilience, and rebellion. Heroes and heroines who stood against oppression are finally getting the recognition they deserve in the hearts and minds of their descendants. Through this journey, there is a growing awareness that African history does not begin with slavery. It was interrupted by it. By tracing their roots, members of the diaspora are piecing together a legacy that is both global and deeply African. They are reclaiming a narrative of strength, intelligence, creativity, and unity that the world once tried to erase. In doing so, they are not only learning about Africa, they are helping to rewrite its history with the dignity and truth it deserves. 5. Connection with modern Africa. All across different continents and generations, a powerful movement has been unfolding among people of African descent. More and more Africans in the diaspora are searching for their roots, not just to understand where they come from, but to forge a genuine connection with the Africa that exists today. This journey goes beyond ancestry. It is about belonging, identity, and reconciling with a homeland that many were long separated from through no choice of their own. As they retrace their roots, many are realizing that Africa is not frozen in the past. It is evolving, dynamic, and deeply complex. Reconnecting with the continent means understanding its current realities, its struggles, yes, but also its progress, creativity, and resilience. Whether it's the booming tech scenes in Lagos and Nairobi, the rising influence of Afrobeat and African fashion, or the growing platforms for African literature, business, and innovation, modern Africa is vibrant and full of life. This search for connection is also emotional and spiritual. For those who have grown up in lands where they often feel like outsiders, navigating racism, cultural disconnection, or questions of identity, that Africa represents not just origin, but a possibility of wholeness. The entire search for our true identity is just like walking down the streets of Accra or Dakar and feeling for the first time a sense of home and belonging. It's about learning local languages, understanding political movements, celebrating traditional festivals, or simply engaging with people who share a similar rhythm of being. Many Africans on the continent are reaching out to the diaspora, eager to bridge the long-standing divide. The rise of Pan-Africanism, cultural exchange programs, and dual citizenship offers are all signs that the connection is no longer one-sided. There is a shared longing to reunite a people separated by centuries of history and reimagine a future shaped by unity rather than division. In tracing their roots, Africans in the diaspora are not just looking backward, they are reaching forward toward a relationship with a living, breathing Africa. An Africa that welcomes them not just as visitors but as family returning home. Going forward, there have been quite some challenging issues for most Africans trying to trace back their original ancestry. Some of these include, first, lack of records. One of the most painful and persistent challenges faced by Africans in the diaspora as they attempt to reconnect with their ancestral roots is the lack of reliable historical records. This gap isn't just a bureaucratic issue. It is the direct result of a long and violent history of erasure, displacement, and systemic dehumanization. During the transatlantic slave trade, Africans were taken from the continent in staggering numbers, and these individuals were not documented as people with names, families, or tribes. They were reduced to properties. Stripped of their identities, they were listed in shipping manifests by numbers, ages, and physical descriptions, if at all. Their original names were often replaced with Christian or European ones, and their histories were severed the moment they stepped onto slave ships. Generations later, this has created a nearly impenetrable wall for many of their descendants who now search for answers. Unlike in many other cultures where family trees, land records, or birth certificates can help people trace their lineage, African descendants in the diaspora are often left with almost nothing to work from. Colonialism further complicated this by disrupting traditional systems of record-keeping on the continent. In many African societies, history was preserved through oral tradition, stories, songs, proverbs, and community memory. These systems were effective for centuries, but colonial rule often dismissed them as unreliable, replacing them with foreign administrative systems that paid little attention to the people they ruled, especially rural or indigenous communities. Moreover, colonizers and slave traders often destroyed or ignored African methods of documentation. Temples, palaces, and archives were looted or burned, and languages were suppressed, making the few remaining records difficult to interpret. Today, even within Africa, tracing one's roots back to a specific village, clan, or tribe can be challenging due to the disorganization or loss of historical documentation. This absence of records leaves many in the diaspora with only fragments, family oral traditions that may have faded, surnames that were changed multiple times, or vague mentions of West Africa or the Gold Coast as their place of origin. For those who desperately seek a deeper sense of identity, this is more than frustrating and really heartbreaking. Despite these barriers, many are still pushing forward. Some turn to DNA testing to fill in the blanks. Others rely on oral history, cultural patterns, or regional research to reconstruct what was lost. But the lack of records remains a gaping hole in the story, a silence that speaks volumes about the violence of the past and the resilience required to reclaim what was once taken. In essence, the absence of ancestral records is not just about missing paperwork. It's about generations of people whose histories were deliberately obscured and whose descendants now carry the heavy task of piecing together their legacy with limited tools. It is a challenge that makes the journey painful, but also one that makes every recovered detail a powerful act of remembrance and restoration. Second, language barriers. As Africans in the diaspora search for their ancestral roots, one of the most deeply felt obstacles is the barrier of language. Language is more than just words. It is the voice of a people, a vessel of culture, history, values, and memory. When language is lost, so too are the intimate threads that connect generations across time. For many in the diaspora, not knowing the language of their ancestors makes the journey home feel incomplete. The centuries of displacement, enslavement, and colonization did not only remove African people from their land, it removed them from their languages. On slave ships and plantations, African tongues were silenced, often violently. Enslaved Africans who spoke the same languages were deliberately separated to prevent unity and rebellion. Over time, the ability to speak Yoruba, Igbo, Wolof, Akan, or Mande was stripped away, replaced by colonial languages like English, French, Portuguese, or Dutch. This historical rupture still echoes today. Descendants of Africans living in the Caribbean, the US, South America, and across the globe in general might feel a deep longing to speak the language of their ancestors, only to realize they have no access to it. Unlike those who can look to their grandparents or community for linguistic inheritance, many in the diaspora were born into a silence, where language, as a bridge to the past, no longer exists. Even for those who travel to Africa to reconnect, the language divide can be painfully obvious. They may land in Nigeria, Ghana, Senegal, or Angola, eager to understand and be understood, but find themselves outsiders to a rhythm and sound that once belonged to them. While colonial languages are often still spoken in major cities, traditional languages dominate in rural areas, the very places many diaspora Africans feel most spiritually drawn to. Not knowing the local language can make it harder to engage in deep conversations with elders, follow oral histories, or participate fully in cultural rites and ceremonies. Beyond just communication, language holds the soul of a culture. Words that describe kinship, spirituality, nature, and history don't always have direct translations. Losing the ability to speak or understand these languages can mean missing out on the emotional, symbolic, and spiritual essence of one's heritage. Still, many are not giving up. Across the diaspora, there's a growing effort to reclaim African languages. People are learning Yoruba online, studying Twi through cultural exchange programs, or practicing Swahili in community classes. Though learning a language as an adult is challenging, the act itself is powerful. It is a statement that says, I have not forgotten who I am trying to be. The language barrier, then, is not just a practical hurdle, it is a wound from history. But every word relearned, every phrase understood, is a step toward healing. It's about restoring a voice that was once silenced, and in doing so, rekindling a conversation between past and present, between the diaspora and the continent, between identity and belonging. 3. Limited access to information. For many Africans in the diaspora, the journey of tracing their ancestry is often met with a frustrating and painful reality: limited access to information. It's not just about the desire to know where one comes from. It's about not knowing where or how to begin. The information that could answer their deepest questions often feels just out of reach, hidden behind locked archives, lost records, distant institutions, or simply never documented at all. Unlike those whose histories were carefully recorded in family Bibles, national archives, or church registries, many descendants of enslaved or displaced Africans are forced to piece together their identity with fragments. The trail often runs cold after just a few generations. The names of great-grandparents may be remembered, but beyond that, the story becomes foggy, full of guesswork, half-remembered tales, and missing links. Part of this challenge lies in the way African history has been handled, both during and after colonization. Colonial powers rarely recorded African lives with care or accuracy. Much of the continent's history was deemed unworthy of preservation unless it served foreign interests. Even today, many African archives remain underfunded, disorganized, or inaccessible to the public. Those that do exist may be written in colonial languages or old dialects, making them difficult for people in the diaspora to interpret. In the digital age, where others can trace their lineage through ancestry websites and genealogical databases, most African descendants are often left behind. Many African countries have yet to digitize birth, death, and land records, or they may have suffered decades of political instability that destroyed historical documentation altogether. Even oral histories, which were once a vital method of preserving identity, are becoming harder to access as elders pass away without recording their knowledge. Then there's the issue of distance, both physical and emotional. Someone in the diaspora may live thousands of miles from the village their ancestors once called home. They may not know which country to start from, let alone which region, tribe, or family line. Without local connections, navigating these spaces can feel overwhelming and lonely. Despite all this, the hunger for information persists. Many are turning to community groups, cultural organizations, and even social media to gather insights and share experiences. Some travel to the continent to ask questions directly, sit with elders, and visit museums and historical sites. Others are using DNA technology not only to identify their origins, but to connect with living relatives across the globe. Even small discoveries, a name, a region, a family tradition, can bring a sense of clarity and connection. The limitation of information is one of the heaviest burdens on the journey of ancestral discovery. But in every effort to seek out the truth, no matter how slow or fragmented, there is power. It is a way of saying, I deserve to know who I am. And even when the past refuses to give all its answers, the act of seeking itself becomes a form of resistance, dignity, and restoration. Fourth, fragmentation of African ancestry. For Africans in the diaspora, one of the most complex and emotional challenges in tracing their roots is dealing with the fragmentation of their ancestry. Unlike others who may trace their lineage to a single nation, village, or surname, many people of African descent discover that their heritage is not linear, but scattered. Their DNA may connect them to multiple regions, ethnic groups, or even entire parts of the continent, with no clear starting point or unbroken thread. It is both fascinating and frustrating, just like a puzzle with many pieces, but no single picture. This fragmentation is a direct result of the traumatic forces that shaped the African diaspora: slavery, colonization, and forced migration, where families were torn apart, tribes dispersed, and identities erased or remixed. Enslaved Africans were rarely taken from one place alone. They were gathered from different ethnic groups, different ports, sometimes even different regions. By the time their descendants were born generations later in the Caribbean, the Americas, or Europe, their ancestral makeup had become a mixture of diverse African lineages, blended through generations of survival and separation. In modern times, DNA testing has offered new ways of reconnecting with this lost history. But while results may point to connections with places like Nigeria, Ghana, Cameroon, or Sierra Leone, they often reveal a complex web of ancestries rather than a single tribal origin. A person might discover that their roots trace back to 4 or 5 different ethnic groups across West and Central Africa. Instead of clarity, they are faced with a question: where do I really belong? This fragmented identity can feel overwhelming. Unlike someone who can point to one village, one language, one culture, many in the diaspora must piece together a story that was never told to them in full. They must accept that their identity is not built from a single line, but from many branches, each carrying a different history, a different pain, and a different strength. Yet, within this fragmentation lies a quiet form of beauty. It reflects the vastness of the African story, the interwoven cultures, migrations, and connections that existed long before borders were drawn. It speaks to a legacy of survival and adaptability. The descendants of enslaved and displaced Africans may not have one homeland, but they carry the memory of many. Each ancestral link is a thread tying them back to a continent rich in diversity, depth, and resilience. Still, this fragmentation remains one of the most emotional aspects of the ancestral journey. It challenges those in the diaspora to rethink what it means to belong, to understand that identity may not always come in a neat, singular form. Sometimes it is layered, sometimes it is complex, but always it is worthy of pride. In navigating this fragmented past, many are not just seeking to find where they come from. They are learning to embrace all of what they carry. Even if no one place can tell their full story, the continent as a whole reflects the pieces of who they are. 5. Lack of knowledge and resources. For many Africans in the diaspora, the desire to reconnect with their roots is strong, but the path is often blocked by a painful reality: the lack of knowledge and resources needed to begin the journey. This absence goes beyond money or access. It's about generations of lost context, stolen history, and limited means to uncover what was once theirs by birthright. For many, the lack of knowledge starts at home. Generations of diaspora families, especially those descended from enslaved people, who were raised without clear stories of their African past. Colonization and enslavement created deliberate gaps. Parents and grandparents who didn't know, couldn't say, or were too wounded to pass on the truth of where they came from. As a result, people grow up knowing they are African by blood, but with little or no sense of what that truly means in cultural, historical, or spiritual terms. Even those who want to learn often don't know where to start. They may not be aware of which country their ancestors came from, let alone the region, tribe, or cultural group. They may not know that African naming systems, oral traditions, or clan structures once held keys to identity. Without someone to guide them or resources to study, the search can feel like reaching into a dark, endless ocean, hoping to grab something solid. Then comes the challenge of resources. Tracing ancestry often requires access to DNA tests, historical archives, language learning, and travel, all things that are financially out of reach for many. Ancestry kits can be expensive, and interpreting the results requires cultural knowledge that isn't always readily available. Traveling to Africa to physically connect with one's roots is a dream for many, but the cost of flights, lodging, and time away from work makes it nearly impossible for those with limited means. Even digital access can be a barrier. Not everyone has the internet tools, educational background, or guidance to research their ancestry effectively. And for those who do make progress, the process is often slow, emotionally taxing, and full of dead ends. This lack of knowledge and resources doesn't just slow the journey, it adds another layer of pain. It reminds diaspora Africans that the disconnect was never their fault, but that healing and reconnection now come at a cost they often struggle to afford. It can leave them feeling helpless, as if the story of who they are remains locked behind invisible doors. Yet even in the face of these challenges, many are finding ways to push forward. Community groups, grassroots networks, and online forums have become lifelines. People share stories, offer guidance, raise funds, and hold each other through the uncertainty. Some begin with books, podcasts, or documentaries. Although small, these are meaningful steps toward understanding. And with each step, no matter how slow, the knowledge grows. The lack of knowledge and resources is a heavy burden, one placed on the diaspora by history itself. But even with limited means, the search for identity continues, powered by a determination that says, I may not have everything I need, but I will still try to find who I am. And in that effort, there is hope, dignity, and the beginning of reconnection. As the Black diaspora continues to trace its ancestry across the globe, this journey becomes more than just a personal search. It becomes a global movement of healing, remembrance, and reconnection. It's about restoring what was broken, rebuilding what was lost, and proudly reclaiming an identity that history once tried to erase. Every discovery, every name, village, language, and story brings us closer to understanding not only where we come from, but who we truly are. And through this, a scattered people are slowly becoming whole again. That brings us to the end of yet another heartwarming video. Don't forget to like, share, to keep spreading awareness, and kindly subscribe to stay tuned into the channel if you are yet to. Also, reach out to us in the comment section and let us know what ancestry means to you. Where are you now on your own journey? Until next time, keep searching, keep learning, and keep remembering. You are part of something far greater than you've ever imagined. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next one.